Welcome back to the WakeMan channel. Alright, so before I get into this video, I just want to let you know I have some WakeMan gear available. So if you're interested, you should go visit wakeman.com. Okay, so this video is going to cover the 5-year cost of owning a wakeboat. And this video will be the 15th edition to the Wakeboat ownership series. I'll put a link right above me if you want to go check out the rest of that series. So to start off with, I did make a video a little while ago where I provided a calculation you could use to calculate the annual cost or the yearly cost of a wakeboat. And there were several assumptions that I was making in that video, but the main point of the video was to provide you a formula to calculate your own annual cost. So that being said, I am going to take the starting figures from that video. So I'll put a link to that video right above me so that you can check that video out and figure out how I got the numbers that I'm going to start with. But in today's video, we're going to change a few things because we're going to calculate the 5-year cost, and there are going to be some different costs that come up in that calculation because no longer am I worrying about those things that are happening every year. I am now also concerned about those things that may happen every couple of years, every 3 years, or maybe even every 5 years. And in this video, I'm also going to take into consideration depreciation. And I'll also explain to you why I did not take that into consideration in my annual cost. All right, so to give you those starting figures, first of all, we have to assume some sort of scenario. And the scenario I'm going to assume is the same one I did in my annual cost video, which is a brand new $100,000 wakeboat that we've put down 10% on, and we have on a 20-year loan, and our payment ends up being right around $600 a month. And that scenario gives us the following starting costs. And I'm going to give you 2 scenarios throughout this video. One is going to be for 100 hours of use for a season or a year, which is what I typically put on my boat. The other scenario is going to be 50 hours on a boat per year or per season because that's closer to the average use of a boat. So if I were to start off with the 100 hours of use, our first figure is $7,200 of 1 year's worth of payments on the boat, which would be $600 a month times 12. In this video, I'm going to change that figure because when we're looking at a 5-year cost, it would make more sense to figure out a depreciation cost. And in my annual cost video, I was just taking the full payment as a cost because it's just what you're paying out. But part of that loan payment is paying principal down on your asset, even though that asset is depreciating. So in this case, we're only going to take into consideration the interest we are paying to that loan as a cost, and then we're going to calculate depreciation separately over 5 years. So that one will be changed a bit. The next thing we're going to take into consideration is $600 a year for insurance. The next figure that we're going to take into consideration is $250 worth of annual maintenance, or $700 worth of annual maintenance, depending on whether or not you do that maintenance yourself or have somebody else do it. That's going to change some as well because there are some different intervals of different maintenance items that come up in the span of 5 years when you have a new boat. For example, changing your V-drive fluid, changing your transmission fluid, those types of things. So we'll take some of those extra costs into consideration. The next item is fuel cost. And there's going to be a fuel cost for the boat and a fuel cost for towing. The next item is for annual gear, which you can either put in your calculation or not. That's just what I'm choosing to put in mine because I generally get some sort of new gear every year. And for this video, I'm going to add a few things that I did not have in my annual cost. And the reason for that is because I've had some comments on that video asking about the different items. And these are simply items I don't I wasn't taken into consideration because I don't pay for them separately, but there are some people out there that are paying for these things separately, so I'll just throw them in there to give you an example of how you could include those into your cost. One of those items is storage, so we'll come up with a figure there, whether you have land storage for your boat or if you're paying for a boat slip. The other item I'll take into consideration in the cost is launch fees. I've never paid a launch fee. It's not common in Montana and Wyoming, but from what I hear, it is pretty common elsewhere. So I'll include a cost for that as well. So that's pretty much it. Those are all the items, and what I've shown you except for the extra options is what the annual cost was in my annual cost of ownership video. But now I'm going to break it down to 5 years. So I'm going to go ahead and use the amortization spreadsheet that I've used in a couple of videos now. The first one that I did this in was my most popular video, and I'll put a link to that right at the top of the screen. So you can refer back to that if you have questions about how I got the detail of this. But I've taken myself right back to where I've got a $100,000 boat. I put 10% down, and then I end up with just a little under $600 a month for a monthly payment. But you can see that the schedule actually breaks the interest down per payment. And all I need to do is get a total of the first 5 years. So basically I need to take 60 payments. So there's 12 months in a year, 12 payments in a year, 12 times 5 years, we get 60. So I just need to get down to the 60th payment. So you can see that that is the 60th payment right there. So I'm just going to come right out to the side here and do a little calculation. This is just a typical Excel calculation. And then I'm going to grab the interest column starting at 60 and go all the way up to the first payment, and there is my 5-year interest cost of $20,703.76. Okay, so next I want to get the cost of depreciation over 5 years. So 2020 and 2021 I think are going to be different than a lot of years because of coronavirus, and a lot of people were out doing more RVing and boating, and I think it really stimulated the market. So this probably isn't a great example. In the annual cost video, what I was suggesting is that you take the total amount of the boat when you bought it and you divide it by about 25 years, because the value on these types of boats, if they're well taken care of, usually lasts around 25 years or beyond 20 years anyways. And so that would kind of give you a yearly figure of how much it's depreciating. And more of that is going to be up front. So for example, if I use my $100,000 boat as an example, I could divide 100,000 by 25 and it would give me about $4,000 a year. But bigger chunks of that are going to come off the front end. So I would say for the first 3 years, it might be between $5,000 to $6,000. But as you can see, I am looking at some listings online at the time of this video, which I'm making this video mid-January of 2021, that there are a few boats out here. I only see one with a price that is a 2017, similar to the boat that I am using as an example, and it's listed for $92,995. But this boat has a bigger motor in it, and it has near the amount of hours that an average user would put on it. Like I said, about 50 hours a year. But it doesn't have as many hours as I would have put on it, which is about 100 hours a year. So I would actually take probably a $5,000 off of this just because it has the upgraded engine in it. And the upgraded engine cost more than this when you added it when it's brand new. At this point in time, because of the market that we sit at right now, now this is, we don't know what they're actually going to get for this boat. So that could take some more off too, but when we're taking the boat that I have, for example, into consideration. So there's just several variables that can come into play. I think what would be best though is going out on Boat Trader or onlyinboards.com and finding an example of a boat a lot like yours and seeing what it's listed for, because you know you can at least get it for that. So in that scenario, even though I think it's going to be depreciated more in 5 years, and we're not even quite to 5 years for the year of this, I'm going to estimate it at about $85,000, and that's probably a little high, to be honest. And I would always say, be more reserved when you're making these calculations, because you wouldn't want to make a calculation that looks really good on paper, but then you're expecting to get a certain amount out of your boat when you go to sell it, and then you're disappointed when you can't get that. So be more reserved when you're making these calculations, and I think the numbers will work better for you. So if we used $85,000, so what that would mean is that our depreciation over 5 years was $15,000. Okay, so now that we're done with the depreciation calculation, let's take our insurance into consideration. We're literally just going to take the annual insurance cost from my annual cost video, which is $600 a year, and multiply that times 5, and we get $3,000 for insurance cost. And then we move on to maintenance. And I would say for myself, where I have a $250 a year cost of maintenance, I'm going to first take that times 5, so we have $1,250 for 5 years of maintenance. But we're also going to add a few things to that. I'm just going to go ahead and add another $500 to that, because there's going to be impeller replacements, there's going to be V-drive fluid exchanges, there's going to be transmission fluid exchanges, and various different things in between there that you should do on in your service manual. So for me, that's going to be $1,750. For a normal boat user who's not doing their own maintenance, we've got $700. And we're going to multiply that times 5 first, so that's $3,500 for 5 years of normal oil changes and winterizations. And we're also going to add another $1,000 for that user, because they would have had some of those items in between there, like the V-drive fluid exchange, the transmission fluid exchange, impeller change, and they're taking it to a dealer to get that done. So we end up with $4,500 for the average user. Now, keep in mind, as we go through all this stuff, you want to try to come up with your own figure that makes sense for you. So the next item we have is the annual cost of boat fuel. So we're literally going to take the annual cost of boat fuel for both the 100 hours and 50 hours, and we're going to multiply that times 5, and that's going to be our number for our 5-year boat fuel cost. Then we're going to take our annual cost for towing fuel, and we're going to multiply that times 5 for both as well, and that will be our 5-year towing fuel cost. And then we're going to do our $500 a year gear cost and multiply that times 5, so that becomes $2,500. And then we're going to come up with some new numbers for storage and launch fees. So for my use and storage fees, I typically wouldn't put anything there, but I did build my house to suit my boat, and obviously that probably cost me some money. So let's just say I'll just go back to when I was paying for storage, and I was paying about $150 a month for storage of my boat. For the average user, I'm going to go ahead and put $300 a year, because it can really range depending on whether or not you have a slip or you're paying for dry land storage. So let's go ahead and do $300 a month for the average user. And then for launch fees, for me, if there were launch fees, which there are not, so typically I wouldn't take that into consideration. But if there were launch fees, I've heard they can be anywhere from like $10 to $20. There might be more in some places. But I'm going to take $15 per launch. And for me, I am launching about 50 times a year. So I will have to take 50 times 15, and that's $750. For the average user, I would say it's probably likely they're launching about 10 times a year, so that'd be $150. Okay, so that brings us to a grand total of $60,378 for a person like me using their boat 100 hours a year. Damn, that's a lot of money, but honestly, I would pay that over and over and over and over again for the memories it makes me. The fun times that I've had are definitely worth that amount of money. And also the grand total for somebody using their boat for about 50 hours a year is $54,428. So that gives you a good idea of what a 5-year cost of a wake boat would be, or owning a wake boat would be. And I'm simply providing this video as help for anybody who's trying to figure out how to calculate these things. And also, I think it's just interesting. Again, I'm not trying to hate on how much these things cost. I actually completely believe in spending the money because I love it, but just want to provide some helpful information, and I hope this video helps you out. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, please subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you can be notified of my future videos. I'll see you next week.